Hello and welcome to the Cars.co.za podcast studio. My name is Chiro de Siena and I am delighted to be joined by Sascha Sauer, MD of Audi South Africa today. Sascha, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thank you very much for this pleasant and warm welcome, Ciro. I'm happy and excited to be with you here at Cars.co.za in Cape Town. Lovely Cape Town weather outside, so I'm happy to be with you.
Because you're based in Johannesburg, right?
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, we're based in Sandton in the heart of Johannesburg.
Okay, all right. So this is a little work trip for you down to the Cape.
It is, yes. In fact, it is. True.
Good stuff. All right. Well, just before we get started, everything you see here in front of us is for sale on our SentiMETAL shop, Cars.co.za/shop. And Sascha, I made sure there was an Audi in studio for you today, the Quattro. I hope you approve.
Yes. Very nice. Thank you very much.
No problem. Maybe you take that one home with you if you
Maybe.
like. All righty. So Sascha's here with us today because, excitingly, Audi, pretty much starting from today, over the next, say, 6 months, maybe over the course of 2022, Audi South Africa will be launching 6 electric vehicles onto our market, which is a really, really bold move from a manufacturer. So Sascha, maybe let's just talk about a couple of those vehicles. What can South Africans expect on showroom floors?
Yeah, first of all, it starts next year. You're right. We're going to launch the first cars early next year in the first quarter. And as you have indicated already, it's a bold movement from our brand, and it's a very committed statement from our brand. And I think that's very important for us as well as for our potential consumers to take note of. The fact that we are not just throwing in another new model and just launching a new car like any other car. We're really launching, and that's our strong belief of the entire team and the entire organization. We are, in fact, launching the future of premium mobility into the country in a very committed way. It's going to be at first 3 new models in 6 different model derivatives, as we call them, and we refer to them. But indicating to what you said earlier, it's also a start into a journey, and it's gonna bring with it another couple of launches over the next couple of years. So we in fact will be launching a new model every year thereafter. So we soon will have an entire and fully fledged fleet available of EV cars in South Africa.
Wow, that's very, very exciting. Obviously, I mean, with the internet being what it is today, we can watch car reviews from all over the world on YouTube. And I have been keeping up with the Audi products that have been launching. And just for our audience watching, we'll get a couple of shots with it. But Sascha and the team brought an E-tron SUV into our office. It's actually sitting behind me right now, just outside the podcast studio. So we'll get a few shots of that. So Sascha, will that be one of the early models that comes in?
That's absolutely correct. We will be launching an E-tron 55 SUV, as we brought to your offices today, which is standing outside at the moment. We will be launching an E-tron Sportback version of that model in different derivatives and different drivetrain versions and different configurations. And we will be launching the halo of the brand, the all-new E-tron GT, which has just been launched in Europe beginning of this year. So we're very, very close to that launch period. And we will be launching also an E-tron RS GT, so the RS version of the E-tron GT here in the South African market early next year.
Wow, that car is stunning. Hey? That is a really good looking car.
It was just awarded, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, a couple of days back over the weekend in Germany by a famous German newspaper and magazine, Auto Bild, and Auto Bild am Sonntag. The most beautiful car in the world award. So we're very happy and very excited about that award. So that means something to us.
Yeah, no, and I think well deserved. I mean, it looks like nothing else on the road. I think your team of designers there knocked that one out the park. It's I'm looking forward to seeing that on South African roads. But talking about South African roads, I think the debate around EVs, one is it's in 2 parts, right? So one is the product. What is the product? What is the range? What's it like to live with? So maybe we can chat about that. Mm-hmm. And then the other part is obviously infrastructure. And in a South African context, this is where our South African audience tends to get quite anxious, right? Because the dread of load shedding hangs over us all the time, etc. And we've spoken about at Cars.co.za, we've spoken about the fact that we don't think South Africa's problems are insurmountable in terms of adopting EVs. That's sort of the position we've taken as Cars.co.za. But let's maybe take the debate back one step, and we'll get to infrastructure. In terms of product, do you feel that EVs now are at a place where they are comparable or better to traditional cars?
Well, in many ways, I think, and I'm convinced of that deeply, they are. If you just take the torque and the pulling power and the performance and how it's being delivered is quite different to an ICE combustion engine car, traditional combustion engine car. This particular car in front of your office here and the recording studio's got a 300 kilowatt engine output, and it's got 660 Newton meters of performance and pulling power.
Sure.
So that makes it quite a quick car from standstill. And in terms of the range, talking about range anxiety specifically in this country, it has a 440 kilometer range classified as per the WLTP cycle, which is the normal testing cycle nowadays where vehicles get tested. I think it's state of the art. And in terms of the various anxieties which exist around the usage of EV cars, I think the South Africans will adapt to it quicker than we think. I think there is, especially in the Western Cape and around here in Cape Town, there is a high awareness about environment, about living a healthy lifestyle, and probably also being helped tremendously by the pandemic situation. There is a keen interest among many people I met recently and for living a more meaningful lifestyle and a more conscious lifestyle. And I think those people who can afford these kind of cars, they will be very keen and very interested in buying these cars. And I think the technology has reached such a maturity level, meanwhile, that buying a car, operating a car, and living with the car is just going to become a very normal thing. So you would not have to, you wouldn't have to sacrifice anything which you are used to when it comes to owning and running a normal car, a combustion engine car. We know from many markets and from experience that about 80% to 85% of the charging will happen at home, what we refer to as kind of a top-up charging. So the same thing which happens with our handheld devices, the iPhones and whatever we have nowadays, and tablets and laptop computers, you never run out of charge, although you have a load shedding situation in this country, right?
That's a good point, yeah.
So you know how to make a plan, so to speak, and how to set up your schedule. And well, let's face it, the car has got a range of 440 kilometers, so you normally don't get home with an empty battery in this case, and then you'll be surprised by load shedding of Eskom. So I think you will always find the car being topped up in the morning and charged to the fullest, which gives you another 400 kilometers of range in the morning when you go to work. Yeah, and average commuting mileage is around 50 kilometers in this country every day. So no one of us travels hardly more than 50 kilometers on average, to work and back. So I think it's all relative. I know about the anxieties. I've been confronted a lot with load shedding in recent weeks and months, of course. But I think it's like charging a phone, like charging a handheld device, any other device which we charge at home. It's just going to become normal practice, and you will make a plan around that charging. And the battery and the capacity is big enough that you don't necessarily need to charge the car every single day.
Yeah.
And that, I think, puts it a little bit into perspective how you use that product and how you actually charge that product.
I think that, if I look at myself, right, let's say I was to own an electric car right now, I live 10 Ks from work. So my commute's 20 Ks. It's less than half of the average commute of the average South African. So 20 Ks, I would then charge my Audi once every 22 days.
Well, if you were to use the car only
Yes,
and explicitly
only
to go
for
back
home.
and forth, you're
Yeah.
right. You would probably then give it a little bit of a buffer, let's say, but you
Yes.
would probably charge it once a month, you could say,
Yeah.
every 20 days. And that puts it a little bit into perspective.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
And even if you were to charge it every day, it means you come home and you drop the battery by whatever percentage. And in the morning, even if you have a very slow charging speed at home, the car would be fully charged overnight. There's nothing to be worried about in this sense.
So we're actually working with Audi South Africa at the moment because we're changing one of our plugs here to an industrial plug, so we can get, I think, 7 kilowatts out of it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 7.2, 7.4 depends a little bit on the voltage, between 220 to 30 voltage.
Okay. And I mean that stands to reason then that the average South African could do that at home, right? They could just install one of these industrial plugs. It's a fairly small operation from what I understand. And then you've got a decent amount of charging power to recharge the car without going for, say, a big Audi wall box or, a dedicated charging unit. Yeah,
that's exactly true. So we are actually still discussing and exploring internally whether we can support our potential customers also in the early phase with installation work at their home to make sure that every customer can set up a industrial socket, which you were referring to right now, in order to increase the charging power to 7.2, 7.4 kilowatt, which will be sufficient to definitely top up the battery overnight, even if you come home with just 5 or 10% of remaining battery capacity. If you're charging it overnight, say 10 hours, it's going to give you another 70-something kilowatt hours in your battery capacity. So it's almost full in the morning when you leave again.
Oh, I see.
So
what is the size of the battery?
It's a 95 kilowatt
95,
battery with a usable capacity of around 86 kilowatts. So it would always be almost, charged to the max in this scenario, which we were just discussing.
Yeah.
So we're debating and discussing internally whether we can support our customers to set up an industrial socket at home to ensure that they can charge the car with 7 point something instead of the normal single phase plugs layout, which is giving you around 3.2 to 3.6 kilowatt charging power, which is not enough, I think.
Yeah, that would take a very long time to obviously charge the battery. But I think that, we're seeing the rapid advancement of superchargers, particularly in Europe, the 300 kilowatt ones, which can charge your battery in 20 minutes or something, or give you 80% in 20 minutes. So, I think for me, the electric car is analogous to the cell phone, right? So the first cell phone was the size of a brick and the battery lasted 33 minutes and if you were lucky. But now look at this thing. I mean, this thing lasts 2 days. It does everything. I mean, it's we are actually essentially in the fairly early days of the electric vehicle revolution. And the future, in my opinion, is actually quite exciting. There's going to be new developments all the time.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that statement. I'm an old school petrol head from my background. I'm an engineer, so I know engines. I know what a gearbox does. I know how it works, and so on. And I like the rattling and everything what makes a lot of noises and which stinks, of course. But I must say, I'm absolutely convinced already. After I've driven the cars a couple of times now, that this is going to be the future, and the future is actually very exciting in my mind. In terms of the performance of these cars, the styling, the design, you've got absolutely new possibilities because of the layout of the car. You're getting rid of gearboxes, for example, of clutches and stuff like that. So you have far more space and freedom to design a car and engineer the car in a different way. So that's very exciting to me. The performance is outstanding as indicated because of almost 100% of the Newton meter being available from standstill onwards, and that's a completely different driving experience. Even I've driven the cars here in South Africa, and the conditions here and the road conditions here, I think they have absolutely their merits, and I think they will have a lot of fans very soon. in this country too. So
I agree. From a brand perspective, as car journalists, we've been told and we've been given these little tastes of electric cars, from some of your competitors, and then we're told, oh no, it's coming next year, and then the next year comes, oh no, it's coming next year. And obviously COVID has really spanned quite a lot of plans for people, and we understand, but it intrigues me that why is Audi pulling the trigger now? Why have you decided that now is the right time?
Yeah, there are a couple of reasons for that. I think one of them is a very straightforward reason, and you indicated it right now. It's the pandemic, of course, which caused a little bit of a delay and some questions whether this would be the right time or not. But also, I tend to say perfection needs time. And we wanted to do it right. We wanted to ensure once we bring cars to the market, they are the right cars. And we also were clear in the team that we needed to have the right approach. And what we definitely wanted to avoid was to just launch another car, like a normal car, like another addition to a range of cars. We wanted to make a clear statement and a bold statement. We were thinking about that quite for a long time, how we could do that. And eventually we said, okay, we go all in. We launch all the cars which are available to the South African market in one go, in one big, bold movement. And being late to the party from a global perspective, or let's say a little bit later than most European markets, it gave us the opportunity to launch a couple of cars in one go, because the e-tron has been sold in Europe already for a while. The e-tron GT has only been launched recently. So by combining now the launch, we're combining all the models in one go. And also we were analyzing carefully the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure environment over the past years. And we saw a rapid development of publicly available charging infrastructure, especially over the past 2 years. It went up from roughly around 100 charge points across the country to, meanwhile, roughly 300. So it's quite an exponential growth. And we also discussing internally how we could support that growth going forward from the Audi side and from Volkswagen Group side.
Wow. So I actually didn't realize that there were that many charging points. That's actually that's a decent number. And those are obviously all concentrated in the metros, I'd imagine. So where likely these cars are to be sold mostly.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, if you compare the charge points with the number of electric cars running on driving on South African roads right now, you would probably figure out a ratio which would put South Africa in the top league of international markets and countries. 1 to 1. Yeah. So from that perspective, you would say that we have quite a reasonable number of charging infrastructure set up already. But I also admit that this is a vast country. Yeah. And I think you were referring to it earlier that especially the fast charging and super fast charging situations are very important, because if you want to take the car for a long road trip, then you need fast chargers and super fast chargers, because you don't want to spend hours along a road, let's say somewhere in Colesberg or Hanover or Bloom, just to get the car charged again. So you want to be quick and on the road again. And that's something which we're discussing also, how we could support that super fast charging infrastructure. And I know there are other players out there in the market, including some petrol companies like Sascha and the likes, Total Engine, who are thinking actively about also their future business model and how to set up and how to add additional charges and how to get a foothold in that probably future business model for them as well. So that is gonna expand the network rapidly in my mind, and probably exponentially. We will see exponential growth over the next couple of years once we see more roads on the car. So it's kind of an iterative process. We need more cars on the road to also make it feasible for other players to move into the business, set up more infrastructure, and then we will see even more cars, because people are getting more confidence, gaining more confidence about that technology and about EV cars. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things there for me which is quite interesting. You mentioned the petrol stations, right? So South Africans, of course, are very used to pulling onto a forecourt, filling up their cars, maybe buying a drink and a chocolate or whatever, and heading on their way. And to me, it stands to reason that that's a very good place to put these electric chargers, right? Because everything, the infrastructure is there, the toilets are there, the restaurants, the coffee, all the rest of it. Or if you need help with maybe a tire or something like that, then that's the best place to be. So do you, when you mention that, are you alluding to the fact that we're going to be able to find chargers in traditional petrol stations?
I would tend to think so, yes. Of course, it's not completely in our hands, but I think that is a major concern for us as well. Where would you put these chargers up? Because you cannot obviously leave them just somewhere along the road with no infrastructure around it whatsoever. So you need to attach a certain infrastructure even around a charger and a fast charger along the national routes. So I think that the petrol stations and garages are perfectly prepared for that, and would probably offer the right infrastructure in terms of coffee shops and washrooms and so on. So I think that's probably the right locations, and they are typically every 50, 60, 80 kilometers along national roads. Which is the right probably distance also in the future to charge and top up cars. You need to just have fast enough chargers there, so to accommodate fast charges of cars within a couple of minutes.
Yeah. So the product, right? The thing you're selling can be fast charged. There's not a technology problem. The issue is that there are no fast chargers or super fast chargers right now.
Correct. So the fastest chargers publicly available, there are some even faster chargers, but which are, I would say, rather in a private environment. The fastest chargers in the country currently installed are around 80 kilowatts. Most of them are 60 kilowatt DC chargers. Some of these 60 kilowatt chargers are upgradable to 80 kilowatts, but still that's not fast enough in our mind. So you would need to talk about 150 kilowatt upwards. 150 kilowatt charger, just to give you a number, ballpark number, would charge that car in front of us out here in about, let's say, 40 minutes, 45 minutes.
From 0 to 100.
From 0 to 100. We know that 0 is highly theoretical. Let's say it's going to charge the car in 35 minutes. Yeah. That's probably enough to have a smoke, a cup of coffee, see the washrooms, and then off you go again, fully charged on your way.
Well, if you pulled into the forecourt with, say, a third of a battery, then you're looking at 25 minutes, for instance, to get going again. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Okay. So South African consumers, I think, need to look forward to fast chargers. I think that's something we can look forward to aid our adoption of the electric vehicles. I think that something that the brands are aware of, and maybe us as journalists and maybe the public at large not so much, is the involvement in government in all of this. So around the world, governments obviously come to the party, particularly with subsidies in some countries as well for EV purchases. Has the Audi and Volkswagen Group in general been working with government and trying to change their perspective or get them on board for the EV movement?
Yes, we have, and the discussions are ongoing while we speak. As you may be aware, the Department of Transport has issued, and the government has issued a green paper on the advancement of new energy vehicles recently, and we are involved via NAMSA, which is the relevant body for all the OEMs in the country and players on the industrial side, to liaise and connect with Minister Patel and the Department of Transport, to find ways how we could improve the adoption and accelerate the adoption of EV cars in the country. Now, it took a while to get our colleagues from politics to understand why that would be needed and why we think as an industry that is important to a country like South Africa. But eventually it was understood that South Africa is a production hub, an international production hub. We are producing cars here. A lot of employment is secured through production here and logistics and the broader value-added services around it. The industry is contributing something like 6 to 7% to GDP annually in the country, so it's quite an important industry. And most of the produced products in the country are being exported at the moment to Europe and mainly to UK, for example. But if you know that most markets in Europe are shutting down slowly but steadily now over the next couple of years for ICE engine cars and for the registration and import for ICE engine cars, the question ultimately arises, where are you going to sell your products to in the future if you're only producing ICE engine cars in the country? So I think when it comes to that, also the whole industry must transform in South Africa eventually, and with the ultimate goal of producing electric cars or components down here in South Africa, as otherwise the industry is under tremendous risk when it comes to viability for the future. So, and given the time frame that Audi and many other manufacturers have also committed publicly that they will launch only electric cars going forward from a certain period of time very soon, it also poses another pressure on us as a brand here in the country to transform our business proactively and prepare ourselves for the future, because from 2026 onwards any new car launch will be only electric cars. So and by 2033 we will stop importing and producing cars into South Africa with a combustion engine.
By 2033?
By 2033. So it's going to be a gradual process. Nothing is going to change overnight, but it's going to be a gradual process and development which starts from 2026 onwards and which lasts until 2033. And in order to prepare ourselves also, we needed to go that EV route and to prepare for the future. So I think back to your question, how do we work together with the government? I think it's pretty clear that we work through NAMSA very closely with the Department of Transport in trying to find ways how to incentivize and to how to stimulate the local demand for EV cars. Currently, we have a situation that EV cars are not only being they're not being not incentivized, they're even being penalized in the way we're paying taxes and duties, specifically import duty on those
7%,
cars. It's a 7% difference. You're right. It's 25% instead of 18% for our products originating from Europe. So that is quite a substantial difference if you also consider the ad valorem taxes and the other taxes which come on top of that. So you've got a multiplying factor there.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good point, right? So so let's say you've got a R1 million vehicle. Yeah. You pay an extra 70,000 on it because of that 7%, but then the ad valorem goes on that 70,000, so it's actually more than
the VAT
7%
as well. So you've got a tax on a tax on a tax, so to speak. Yeah.
Wow, so that is definitely an obstacle here. But I suppose, sure, we've got a cash-strapped government, to pry their hands off that tax is, I imagine, quite challenging. But the thing is, like you say, if we don't make this move, we risk losing our entire manufacturing sector, which is large, and we cannot afford to shed jobs in this country. We cannot afford for a large sector to shed jobs. I mean, that would be a disaster. So we have to move. We don't have a choice. Yeah,
I fully agree with that view, and I would be very passionate in advocating that view because I really think that we are, I wouldn't say we're too late, but I think we are in the late stage already, and I think it takes time to prepare such a transformation. And a car cannot be produced overnight in the local market. You need to have a certain critical mass developed in any local market before you can produce a car there. And cars will not be produced here if there is not a critical mass in terms of demand for that product in the market. Because then you would rather probably produce that car anywhere else in the world and export it from there, where you have a local market, like, again, China, for example, or any other markets. And especially our group has got production and manufacturing facilities all around the world. So I think from that perspective, it's really important that the government acts soon and I shall say with enough power behind and enough will to succeed. Because I think you can't adjust too many times your concept if you want to make a breakthrough in this business and for that future technology here in the market.
I think that's perhaps something that is underestimated outside of the people who work in the industry, is that car manufacturers work on a very, very long time scale. It's what, about 7 year per model life, and but that model has been in R&D for X number of years before that. So to say, okay, by 2026 we're only going to be able to, or every new model will be electric. 2026 in car making terms is like around the corner. it's soon. Yeah.
That's exactly correct. And that's why I personally feel a little bit worried and a little bit under pressure, even if many people will think, what are you so concerned about? It's 4 years ahead or 5 years away. That's not a big deal. But I think you're exactly right in emphasizing our cycles, our planning, our preparation time is very long, and we need to prepare for the future today. Unless we have more flexibility in producing and developing cars, which I'm not aware of by now. So we're still talking about these cycles which you just indicated, and that simply means that we have to really start preparing ourselves today. And that's, I think, was a discussion which we had also with Minister Patel and his team, to allude to the fact that we need to have decisions today rather than tomorrow in order to prepare the whole industry for that change. Because bringing a new car here into the country for ultimately a production scenario, I think that takes years of planning, years of preparation, and you cannot just come into the market and say, now I prepare and now I produce the car, because the market is suddenly there and has suddenly developed. It needs all careful preparation and a careful orchestration of different milestones before that. And I think the first step would be really to talk about government support schemes for EV adoption in the country.
And, I suppose a lot of our audience is maybe watching this and thinking to themselves, South Africans love their performance cars. I mean, we're a big performance market in this country for a lot of brands. The RS cars are no different. I mean, I can the amount of friends I have who love the RS3 or have owned an RS3 or want to own an RS3, and all of your other RS cars, obviously the RS6 in particular is one of my personal favorites, the Avant. But what would you say to those South Africans who may be watching this and thinking, oh, my favorite brand is going electric and I'm not going to be able to buy an RS3 tomorrow? So you mentioned 2033, but after that, will there be, say, support for those cars and parts availability and that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, that goes without saying. Of course, we will be having still, dealers around. We still have our trained technicians. We still deliver, of course, produce, deliver, and ensure that we have spare parts available. I think that goes without saying, and that is clear. Also, I like to add the fact that any change is going to happen gradually, as I indicated earlier. It's not going to be a change overnight. You go to sleep with that scenario and you wake up in a different scenario. This is not going to happen. So it's going to be pre-announced. It's going to be a step-by-step approach. You will see far more competitors also moving in with electric cars being on offer. And I wouldn't be surprised next year around the same time if we had a follow-up interview, if we had not already in our segment, probably 20 different car models on offer, where currently there's almost nothing. So I think it will be very quick at the beginning. As I indicated earlier, we will be adding a new model, at least one new model each and every year thereafter. Expanding our product portfolio already as we go, step by step. By 2026 onwards, each and every new car launch will then be only electric cars, which still means that the cars on offer by that time will still have a life cycle. And let's say we launched the last combustion engine model or version in 2026. That version will last and will be updated regularly until 2033. Which means production date. So you could probably assume that the last cars in the country from our brand would probably be sold somewhere as late as 2034.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
still
interesting.
thereafter you've got your service, you've got your spare parts. That's very normal, because you still have a huge car park of normal cars in the country. You know, that's valid for all the brands basically.
Yeah, I'm glad we spoke about that, because that's a question, you know, someone in my position, I get asked about these things all the time. Will I be able to buy and service my, you know, my performance car and until what date? So I'm really glad we spoke about that. But you mentioned that, you know, your love of cars goes way back. I imagine you are quite a thoroughbred petrol head. So when the world is electric, which Audi would you like to have parked in the garage? What just something to keep, you know, from a bygone era?
Well, if I had the choice to choose any model from any era,
any Audi,
I would probably go for an Ur Quattro Quattro version. If I was to decide on a more updated version, I would probably go for an RS3 as well, because I like sporty cars, obviously, and I like the 5-cylinder sound, and I like rather smaller cars personally. Yeah, so I don't need big and heavy cars normally. Although I appreciate that they have their benefits, especially in the South African context and road conditions here. But I would probably keep an RS3 5-cylinder version. That's probably something to collect. Yeah.
Nice. For me, it would probably be a first generation R8, the V8, but with a manual box, because that box, you know, I was a young car journalist. I was maybe 20 years old, and the fleet manager for Audi down here, she made a mistake, and the car was meant to go to the editor of a big magazine, and I'm just this youngster, just started out in the industry, and she gave me this black R8 V8 to drive, and she realized her mistake. She phoned me, she said, no, you know what, just keep the car, just enjoy it for a week. So here I am, 20 years old in this supercar, and having the absolute time of my life. And so that car is actually quite sentimental to me. And those cars, you know, they're actually at a decent price now. You know, they're kind of okay, and I have a feeling they're going to go that way. You know, so I better get moving if I want one. Yeah.
I think that's a good choice.
Yeah, no, that was a special car. It was so interesting to me at the time, because it ended up that Audi was the only brand making an open H-gate manual in the supercar world at one point. That was actually quite an interesting time for that brand. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's probably a very good choice as well. Yeah, and with regard to prices, you're right. They are on the rise. Also, given the general shortage of cars due to semiconductor crisis, but that's a whole lot of a different story, I think. So generally, prices are on the rise, especially also on the used car side, on the pre-owned side. So you better get going.
So there we go. Yeah, get in now. Get hold of the Cars.co.za app. It's free. There's I go on regularly and actually look for R8s and see what their prices are doing. And Sascha, I think on that happy note, I think let's call it a day. It's been wonderful chatting to you. It's been really educational. I've learned a lot. I hope our listeners and our viewers have learned a lot as well. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you and chatting to you on this occasion. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you haven't seen our other podcasts, we do have, I think, another 10 on the channel. The one we did before this was with Alex Parker, where we just asked the question, actually, will electric cars work in South Africa? So if you are interested in the topic, that's a good place to start. Go check out our previous podcast. And of course, there are over 540 videos on our channel. I've lost count, actually. I should probably go count at some stage. So you'll probably find something you like. But Sascha, thanks once again. I really appreciate it. My name's Chira de Siena. Thank you very, very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Thanks.
Cheers.